The discovery. It was a rainy afternoon when Julia Harper decided to finally tackle the cluttered attic. The rain pattered on the roof, creating a soothing rhythm that helped distract her from the empty house. Her husband, Alex, had left for yet another business trip, a frequent occurrence in their marriage of 10 years. Alex was a high-level corporate executive, always traveling to close deals, attend meetings, and make connections. Julia was used to his absence, but lately, something had been gnawing at her, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. The man she had loved for over a decade seemed distant, preoccupied, even when he was physically present. Sifting through the boxes of old memories, Julia stumbled upon a chest she hadn't seen before. It was tucked away in a dark corner, covered in dust and cobwebs. Odd, she thought. She didn't remember ever putting it there. Curiosity piqued. She knelt down and tried the latch. Locked. Frowning, she rummaged through the surrounding boxes until she found a set of old keys she had once used for filing cabinets. As she sifted through them, one key seemed to fit. Her heart raced as she turned it. The lock clicked, and the chest opened with a creak. Inside, there were stacks of documents, photographs, and what appeared to be passports. At first glance, they looked legitimate, but as Julia picked one up, her stomach dropped. It was Alex's face, but not his name. Ethan Hale was printed on the passport, and as she rifled through the others, each one had different names, all accompanied by the same face she knew so well. Her breath caught in her throat. A sinking feeling overtook her. She continued to examine the documents. Maps, notes, some written in languages she didn't understand, some with cryptic symbols. She stumbled upon a photograph of Alex. No, Ethan, or whatever his real name was, meeting with men in suits in what looked like a foreign country. Fear gripped her. What was all of this? Julia hurried to the living room, her mind racing. Could this be some kind of mistake? A prank? No, Alex was not the type to joke like that. The meticulous organization of the documents, the various aliases, everything pointed to something far more sinister. She thought back to the conversations they had before his trips. He often mentioned meetings in Europe, the Middle East, or Asia. He would show her photographs of him in boardrooms, at fancy dinners with clients, and send her text messages from hotel rooms. But now, Julia began to question everything. Her hand shook as she dialed the number of her best friend, Lisa. She needed to talk to someone she trusted. "Hey, Jules, how's it going?" Lisa's voice chirped over the phone, unaware of the emotional storm brewing on the other end. I need to talk to you," Julia stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's about Alex. I think he's been lying to me. About everything." There was a long pause before Lisa replied. "What do you mean? Lying how? I don't even know where to start. I found something in the attic. Passports with his picture, but different names. Documents in strange languages. It's like he's not who he says he is." Another silence. This time, it was heavier, filled with the weight of disbelief. "Julia, are you sure? I mean, that sounds insane." "I know it does, but I'm staring at the evidence right now. It's real, Lisa. I don't know what to do." "Okay, take a deep breath. Don't do anything rash. Let's think this through. You need to find out more. Maybe there's some logical explanation." "There's no logical explanation for 5 fake passports, Lisa," Julia interrupted, her voice cracking under the strain of her fear. "I don't even know who I'm married to anymore." Julia collapsed onto the couch, running her hands through her hair. She had never felt so lost, so disconnected from her life. The man she had shared her life with, built her dreams with, who was he? Was he even Alex Harper? Was anything about their life real? Lisa's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Listen, Jules, you have to be smart about this. If what you found is really as serious as it seems, you can't confront him outright. You need more information. But how? I don't even know where to start. You have to investigate, but quietly. Don't let him know you're onto him. If he's living a double life, confronting him without any backup could be dangerous. Dangerous. The word echoed in Julia's mind. Could she be in danger? Could Alex, no, whoever he really was, be dangerous? The thought chilled her to the bone. She had always thought of Alex as protective, loving, the kind of man who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. But now, her entire perception of him was crumbling. The man she loved might not exist at all. "Okay," Julia finally said, her voice steadier. "I'll be careful. I'll dig deeper, but I'm going to need help. Lisa, will you?" "Of course. I'll help you with whatever you need. But Jules, you have to be careful. If he's really hiding something this big, you don't know who else might be involved." "I know," Julia whispered, her heart heavy with uncertainty. "I know." As she hung up the phone, Julia glanced back at the chest still open on the floor of the attic. A wave of nausea washed over her. She had to act normal when Alex returned, pretend like everything was fine, like she hadn't just uncovered the most terrifying secret of her life. But how could she pretend when her entire world had been turned upside down? Her mind raced with 1,000 questions, but one stood out above the rest. Who was Alex Harper, and what was he hiding? The suspicion deepens. When Alex returned home from his business trip, Julia felt like she was living in a stranger's skin. She had spent the entire week going through the motions, pretending everything was normal, but it was anything but. Every time Alex called, she had to stop herself from letting her voice tremble or giving away the whirlwind of doubt and fear spinning inside her. The man who was now unpacking his suitcase in the bedroom was not the same man she had married, at least, not anymore. "How was Berlin?" she asked, her voice carefully casual as she poured him a glass of water from the kitchen. "Busy, like always," Alex said with a tired sigh, loosening his tie and slipping off his jacket. "The meetings were intense, but we closed the deal, so it was worth it." Berlin. Julia's stomach churned. That was exactly what he had said the last time he'd been away. But now that she had seen the maps in the attic, she questioned everything. The map she found had a path traced in red ink, one that matched the itinerary Alex had described for his so-called conference. But who were those men in the photographs? And what did those symbols on the documents mean? She handed him the glass of water, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I missed you." Alex smiled, that charming, boyish grin that used to make her feel safe. "I missed you too," he said, leaning in to kiss her on the forehead. His lips felt colder than they ever had before, and she had to stop herself from flinching. For the next hour, Alex unpacked his things, filling the house with stories of business deals, high-end dinners, and networking events. It all sounded perfectly ordinary, if she hadn't seen the evidence in the attic. His ease, his confidence, the way he never missed a beat. It was unsettling how well he played the part of the devoted husband. But now, Julia could see cracks in the facade. His stories were too rehearsed, too smooth, like someone reciting a script. As the evening wore on, Julia found herself sneaking glances at him, studying his every move. There was something about the way he moved around the house, something mechanical. He used to ask her about her day, listen with genuine interest, but now it was as if he was going through the motions. His attention felt elsewhere, like his mind was already halfway out the door, heading to the next business trip. Later that night, when Alex was asleep, Julia crept downstairs. She couldn't shake the images of the documents from her mind, and she knew she couldn't just sit in silence any longer. She needed answers, and the internet might be her first lead. Sitting at the kitchen table, she opened her laptop, careful not to make any noise. Her fingers hovered over the keys. How do you search for information about your husband being a spy without attracting attention? She typed slowly at first. What to do if you think your husband is living a double life. The search results flooded the screen. Articles about secret affairs, hidden families, financial fraud, even double agents. Her heart pounded harder. Could Alex really be involved in something so dangerous? She clicked through a few articles, scanning for anything that resembled her situation. One article about spouses discovering their partners were undercover operatives caught her eye. The details were eerily familiar: fake passports, secret meetings, and a spouse left in the dark. Her mind flashed back to the notes she found. Most were in a language she couldn't understand, but a few phrases were in English, phrases that seemed out of place for a corporate executive. Words like surveillance, target, and drop point. Could Alex really be involved in something as serious as espionage? She bookmarked the article and closed the laptop, glancing around nervously as if someone might be watching her. She had to be careful. If Alex was involved in something this deep, then someone, maybe even Alex himself, could be monitoring her every move. Julia returned to bed, her mind swirling with questions. She lay there, wide awake, listening to Alex's slow, steady breathing next to her. How long had he been living this double life? How had she missed the signs? Every time he came back from a trip, she had believed his stories, trusted him implicitly. But now, every trip seemed like a cover, every word a lie. The man lying beside her was a stranger, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was in danger. The next morning, she woke up with a plan. She would go to the attic again and take more photos of the documents, this time paying closer attention to the details she had missed. She needed more information if she was going to understand what Alex, or whoever he was involved in. When Alex left for the office, Julia rushed to the attic. Her heart pounded as she opened the chest once more, this time determined to gather as much evidence as possible. She photographed every document, zooming in on the strange symbols and foreign languages. She took pictures of the passports, each with a different name, but the same face staring back at her. Then, at the bottom of the chest, she found something she hadn't noticed before. It was a small notebook, bound in leather, with pages filled with codes, dates, and locations. One entry caught her eye immediately. It was a set of numbers followed by a date, today's date. Her hands trembled as she read the entry. Drop at 2 p.m. Package to target. What package? What target? She had no idea what the codes meant, but the urgency of the note filled her with dread. Was Alex planning something today? Was this a mission? Julia knew she couldn't confront him directly. Not yet. She needed to know where he was going, what he was doing. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and texted Lisa. Her friend had always been supportive, but she had no idea what Julia was about to drag her into. Lisa, I need you. Meet me at the park at 1:30. I'll explain everything. The next few hours passed in a blur. Julia could barely focus on anything as her mind raced. What was Alex planning? What was this drop? The thought of following him terrified her, but the need for answers outweighed the fear. When 1:30 arrived, Julia drove to the park, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She parked the car and spotted Lisa waiting by a bench, her face filled with concern. As Julia approached, the weight of the secret she had been carrying began to crush her. "Jules, what's going on?" Lisa asked, her voice filled with urgency. Julia sat down next to her, looking around to make sure they weren't being watched. "I think Alex is involved in something dangerous. I found documents, fake passports, coded notes. I don't even know who he is anymore." Lisa's eyes widened in shock. "What? Are you serious?" "I wish I wasn't," Julia said, her voice shaking. "There's something happening today. At 2 p.m. I found a note about a drop. I think he's going to meet someone." "You're not thinking of following him, are you?" Lisa asked, her voice laced with concern. "I have to. I need to know what he's involved in, Lisa. I can't keep living in the dark." Lisa hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but I'm coming with you. You're not doing this alone." Together, they waited, their eyes scanning the park for any sign of Alex. The minutes dragged by, each second heightening Julia's anxiety. Finally, at exactly 1:55 p.m., she spotted him, Alex, walking calmly through the park, carrying a small black bag. He didn't see them as he made his way to a bench near the fountain. Julia's heart raced as she watched from a distance, her entire body tense with anticipation. What was he doing? Who was he meeting? At 2 p.m. sharp, a man in a dark suit approached Alex. They exchanged brief words, and Alex handed him the bag. The man nodded, and within moments, they both walked away in opposite directions. Julia's world spun. She had just witnessed her husband make a drop. But for what? For whom? The questions now swirled faster than ever. But one thing was clear. Alex was not the man she thought he was. The web of lies. Julia sat frozen in her car, her eyes locked on Alex's retreating figure. The black bag he had just handed off weighed heavily in her mind, more so than it ever could in reality. She clutched the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white, her breath shallow and ragged. Beside her, Lisa sat in stunned silence, her gaze darting between Julia and the man they had just watched complete a mysterious exchange. "Jules," Lisa whispered, breaking the suffocating silence. "What just happened? What did we just witness?" Julia shook her head slowly, the reality of the situation still sinking in. "I don't know, Lisa. I really don't. But I do know one thing. My husband isn't who I thought he was." Her voice cracked, barely holding together under the weight of the truth. This is bigger than I imagined. He's involved in something dangerous." Lisa placed a reassuring hand on Julia's shoulder. "We'll figure it out, okay? But we can't just sit here. If he comes back, he might spot us. We need to go." Julia nodded, the numbness of shock creeping into her limbs as she started the car. They drove away from the park in silence, Julia's mind a storm of questions and fears. What was in that bag? Who was that man? And what on earth had Alex gotten himself into? She couldn't shake the image of him calmly handing off the bag, as if this was routine, as if this was his normal life. The man she had loved for over a decade was a stranger to her now, cloaked in secrecy and lies. Back at her house, the atmosphere felt colder than usual. The walls, once comforting, now seemed oppressive, closing in on her with their secrets. Everything around her reminded her of Alex, and now those reminders felt like betrayals. Lisa followed her into the kitchen, where Julia slumped into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "What am I supposed to do, Lisa? How do I even begin to process this?" Lisa sat across from her, eyes wide with concern. "First, you breathe. You take it one step at a time. We can't make sense of this all at once. But Jules, you need to be careful. If Alex is really involved in something dangerous, you need to protect yourself. He's obviously keeping this hidden for a reason." Julia looked up, her eyes bloodshot and filled with exhaustion. "I know, but I can't just confront him. I don't know how deep this goes or how many people are involved. I mean, what if it's something like—" She paused, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. "What if it's illegal, Lisa? What if he's part of some criminal organization? Or worse?" Lisa's face paled. "We don't know that for sure. It could be something else entirely. But whatever it is, you need help. Someone who knows how to handle these kinds of things." Julia sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know who to trust. I don't even know if I can go to the police without tipping him off. What if they're already watching him? What if he's being tracked by someone else? And then, there's the fact that I've been married to this man for 10 years. What if I've unwittingly been complicit in something awful? That's exactly why we have to tread carefully. We need someone who can investigate this without causing a scene. Do you know anyone, maybe someone from Alex's work, who could help? Anyone you trust?" Julia shook her head. "No, I've met a few of his colleagues at company events, but I wouldn't call any of them trustworthy. He's always kept his work life separate from our personal life, and now I see why. But maybe there's someone who can help." An idea sparked in her mind. During one of Alex's business trips, he had mentioned an old friend from university who had become a private investigator. He'd spoken of him fondly, even joking about how the friend always had a knack for finding out everyone's secrets. At the time, Julia had thought it was just banter, but now that seemed like a lifeline. "There's someone," Julia said slowly. "An old friend of Alex. I remember him mentioning that this guy works as a private investigator now. If anyone can help me figure out what Alex is involved in, it's him. Do you know how to reach him?" Julia hesitated. She had met the man only once, briefly, at a company dinner. His name was Sam, and he had struck her as sharp, observant, and a little too curious for her liking. At the time, his prodding questions about Alex's work had seemed innocuous, but now, in hindsight, they took on a different meaning. She remembered Alex dismissing Sam's inquiries as just him being nosy. "I think I can find him," she said. "But I need to be careful. If Alex catches wind of what I'm doing, it could blow up in my face." "Let me help you," Lisa said, her voice firm. "You can't do this alone, Jules. I know you're trying to protect yourself, but you also need someone in your corner." Julia glanced at her best friend, grateful for the support, but terrified of what they might uncover. "Okay," she agreed. "We'll find Sam and see if he can help, but we have to move quickly. If Alex is involved in something this serious, we don't have much time." The next day, Julia dug through her old contacts, finding the number for Sam. With her heart in her throat, she made the call. "Sam, it's Julia Harper. I'm not sure if you remember me, but we met at a dinner a couple of years ago. I need your help." There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by Sam's calm voice. "Julia, of course. I remember. What's going on?" Julia took a deep breath and explained everything. How she had found the passports, the cryptic documents, the strange exchange in the park. She didn't leave out a single detail, hoping that Sam would understand the gravity of the situation. By the time she finished, Sam was silent for a long moment. "That's a lot, Julia. You're right to be concerned. If what you're saying is true, your husband may be involved in something very dangerous. But before we jump to conclusions, I'll need to do some digging." "I thought as much," Julia said, her voice shaking. "But I can't let Alex know I'm onto him. Can you help me investigate this without tipping him off?" "I'll do what I can," Sam replied. "But you need to be careful. If Alex is working in intelligence, or worse, for someone outside the law, you don't want to put yourself in the line of fire." Julia swallowed hard. "I understand. I'll be cautious. I'll reach out once I have something solid," Sam promised. "In the meantime, don't confront Alex. Act like everything's normal." When Julia hung up, she felt a wave of relief mixed with dread. She finally had someone who could help her uncover the truth, but the reality of what that truth might be weighed heavily on her. What if Alex really was involved in something criminal? Or worse, what if he was a spy, tangled in a web of espionage she couldn't even begin to comprehend? As the days passed, Julia kept up the facade of the loving wife, pretending everything was normal. But inside, every interaction with Alex was a performance. She analyzed every word he said, every look he gave, searching for cracks in his story. The waiting was unbearable. Every time Alex left for the office, Julia felt a mixture of relief and terror. She was no closer to understanding the depth of his lies, and yet, with each passing day, the weight of their unspoken truths grew heavier. Then, one evening, Sam called her with news that would change everything. "Julia, I found something," Sam said, his voice tense, "and you're not going to like it." The truth emerges. The phone trembled in Julia's hand as she absorbed Sam's ominous words. "You're not going to like it." Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of dread and anticipation swelling within her. She had spent days agonizing over what Alex's secret could be, her imagination conjuring up scenarios that ranged from espionage to organized crime. Now, the moment she had feared, the moment where her suspicions would be confirmed, was upon her. What did you find?" Julia's voice was barely above a whisper, her throat tightening as if bracing for a blow. Sam hesitated on the other end of the line, his usual confident tone replaced with one of careful consideration. "Julia, I've been looking into Alex's background, into his business trips, his financial records, his connections. There's more going on here than just a few shady deals or secret meetings. It's much deeper than that." Julia swallowed hard. "What do you mean, Sam? Just tell me the truth. I need to know." There was a brief pause, and Julia could hear Sam shuffling papers in the background. When he finally spoke, his words were heavy with concern. "I found evidence that Alex has been living a double life. Not only is he involved in something high stakes, but he's also connected to several foreign agencies. The information I've uncovered suggests that Alex isn't just some low-level operative. He's a key player in an international intelligence ring." Julia's breath caught in her throat. The words "international intelligence ring" hung in the air like a dark cloud, suffocating her. It was worse than she had imagined. She had feared he might be involved in something illegal, but this was beyond her comprehension. It wasn't just a matter of deceit or criminal activity. Alex was operating in a world of espionage, shadowed by global power struggles and hidden agendas. "Espionage," Julia echoed, her voice quivering. "You're saying my husband is a spy?" Sam sighed. "Yes, Julia, that's exactly what I'm saying. He's not the man you thought he was. He's been operating under multiple identities for years. The company he claims to work for, it's a front, a cover for his real activities. His frequent business trips, those were assignments. He's been feeding information back to foreign governments." Julia felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The man she had shared her life with for over a decade, the father of her child, was not just keeping a secret, he was living a lie. Every birthday, every holiday, every tender moment they had shared now felt like an elaborate act, a carefully crafted illusion designed to deceive her. But why? Julia's voice cracked, her emotions threatening to spill over. Why would he do this? Why would he lie to me for so long? Sam's tone softened. "Julia, I don't have all the answers. People get involved in these kinds of things for all sorts of reasons: money, ideology, coercion. It's possible that he got in over his head years ago and couldn't get out. Or maybe this is who he's always been. The point is, he's been hiding this life from you, and that's dangerous. For both of you." Julia's mind raced, flashes of memories blurring before her. She thought of Alex's strange behaviors over the years, his abrupt trips, his cryptic phone calls, the times he would disappear for hours without explanation. She had always brushed them off as the quirks of a busy, successful businessman. But now, those memories felt sinister, each one a clue she had overlooked. "What do I do now, Sam?" Julia asked, her voice small and defeated. "How do I move forward from this?" "First, you need to stay calm," Sam advised. "Don't confront him. He can't know you're onto him yet. If he finds out that you've discovered his secret, it could put you in danger. You need to play along. Act like everything is normal while we figure out the next steps." Julia's hand gripped the edge of the kitchen table as she listened, her mind spinning. Play along. How could she? How could she look Alex in the eye, share a bed with him, knowing he was living a life built on lies? But Sam was right. If Alex was truly involved in something this dangerous, the wrong move could escalate the situation beyond her control. "There's more," Sam added, his voice hesitant. Julia's chest tightened again. "More?" "Yes. In the process of looking into Alex, I found something disturbing. There's been surveillance on you, Julia. Not just Alex. Someone else has been watching you, tracking your movements." Julia's blood ran cold. She instinctively glanced around her house, her eyes scanning the windows and doorways for any sign of intrusion. She felt a creeping sensation at the back of her neck, as if unseen eyes were on her right now. "What do you mean, surveillance? Who's watching me?" Julia demanded, her voice rising in panic. "I don't know yet," Sam admitted. "But whoever it is, they're professionals. They've been discreet, but there are traces of their work. This goes beyond just Alex's operation. There's a much larger game at play here. I'm going to dig deeper, but in the meantime, you need to be extra cautious. Don't do anything out of the ordinary. Keep up appearances." Julia's heart hammered in her chest, the weight of the revelations crashing down on her. She felt trapped, imprisoned in her own life by invisible forces. Her home, which had once been a sanctuary, now felt like a cage filled with secrets and lies. "I'll be in touch as soon as I find out more," Sam said. "But Julia, be careful. Whatever Alex is involved in, it's dangerous. And it's not just about him anymore. It's about you too." After the call ended, Julia sat in stunned silence, her mind replaying everything Sam had just told her. Alex was a spy. He had been lying to her for years, living a double life, and now she was being dragged into his dangerous world without her consent. Worse, someone else was watching her, someone who might have their own agenda. She couldn't stay still any longer. Julia rose from the table and began pacing the room, her mind a whirlpool of fear and confusion. She thought of her daughter, Sophie, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing. Sophie, with her innocent laughter and bright future, could become collateral damage in whatever shadowy conflict Alex was entangled in. "I have to protect her," Julia thought, her maternal instincts kicking into overdrive. "Whatever happens, I have to keep Sophie safe." But how? How could she protect her daughter when she didn't even know who the enemy was? Was it Alex? Was it the people watching her? Or was it some larger, faceless organization pulling the strings behind the scenes? Julia's mind flashed to the black bag Alex had handed off in the park. What had been inside it? Information. Money. Something more sinister. She couldn't shake the image of Alex's calm expression as he completed the exchange, as if this was all just part of his everyday routine. It chilled her to think that her husband could be so composed in the midst of such deception. Determined not to fall apart, Julia sat down at her computer and began researching on her own. She searched for anything that could give her clues about Alex's world, her fingers trembling as she typed in terms like espionage, foreign intelligence, and double life. The results were overwhelming, a sea of information that made her head spin. Hours passed, and Julia found herself deeper in the rabbit hole, no closer to the answers she sought. She realized that she needed more than just vague internet searches. She needed concrete evidence, something she could use to piece together Alex's puzzle. That night, when Alex came home, Julia felt a fresh wave of tension between them. Every word he spoke felt like a lie, every glance a manipulation. She kept her responses brief, her movements careful, not wanting to give away that she knew his secret. But inside, she was crumbling. Her marriage, her life, everything she had known was unraveling before her eyes. And the truth, whatever it was, felt like it would destroy her. In the shadows, Julia sat at the dining room table, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the wood grain. The silence of the house almost unbearable. The weight of the past few days had hollowed her out. Alex was in the other room, watching TV, completely unaware of the turmoil swirling inside her. To him, everything was normal. His charade, his double life, continued unbroken. But for Julia, every breath was a battle to keep her composure. She hadn't slept well since Sam's revelation. The news that Alex was not only living a double life, but also involved in espionage, had shattered her sense of reality. Worse still, the knowledge that she was being watched, tracked by unknown forces, made her feel like a trapped animal. It was suffocating. She glanced at the clock on the wall, its steady ticking a cruel reminder of the limited time she had. She had promised herself she would keep playing along with Alex's game, acting normal until Sam could uncover more information, but the strain of pretending was growing unbearable. Why me? Why us? She thought bitterly. The life she had built, the love she had invested in this marriage, all felt like a lie. And now, the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just dealing with a husband's betrayal. This was about survival. Her survival, Sophie's survival. Her mind flashed to Sophie, who was staying with her friend for a sleepover. For a brief moment, Julia was relieved that Sophie was out of the house. She couldn't bear the thought of her daughter being caught in the middle of this dark, twisted reality. But what kind of future could she give Sophie now? Could she even protect her? The night pressed in around her, the weight of Alex's presence in the house gnawing at her nerves. He seemed calm, too calm, as if this life of deception had become second nature to him. She needed air, space to think without his shadow looming over her. Standing up abruptly, Julia grabbed her coat and keys. "I'm going for a drive," she called out, her voice tighter than she intended. Alex glanced at her, his eyes scanning her briefly before returning to the TV. "All right, don't be out too late." It was a simple enough exchange, but Julia felt the undercurrent of tension. Every word between them was charged now, every look a minefield. She didn't know whether Alex suspected her yet, but she wasn't taking any chances. She needed to think, to get away from him, even if just for a short while. The night air was cool against her skin as she drove aimlessly through the city streets, her mind a mess of thoughts and emotions. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, as if holding on to some semblance of control. She turned down a quiet road lined with old, towering trees, the darkness between them seeming to close in around her. It felt fitting, the world outside as shadowed and full of secrets as the one inside her mind. Pulling into an empty parking lot, Julia switched off the car and sat in silence. She needed to figure out what to do next. She needed more information, something tangible that could help her understand how deep Alex's lies went. Sam was doing what he could, but she couldn't just sit idly by and wait. Time was running out, and every day she spent living this lie with Alex felt more dangerous. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Sam. "Julia," he said urgently, "I found something. We need to meet. Now." Her stomach twisted with anxiety. "What is it? What did you find?" "Not over the phone. I'll text you an address. It's safer this way. Hurry." 30 minutes later, Julia found herself in a dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place people didn't pay much attention to, tucked away in a corner where the city seemed to forget its existence. Sam was already there, sitting in a booth at the back, his face partially obscured by the shadows. As she slid into the seat across from him, she noticed the tension in his expression, the tightness in his jaw. Whatever he had discovered, it wasn't good. "Julia," he began, leaning in closer, his voice low. "I dug deeper into Alex's connections, and I found something troubling. There's a reason you've been under surveillance. It's not just about Alex's involvement in espionage." Julia frowned, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" Sam pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Julia opened it, her eyes scanning the contents. Documents, photographs, and names she didn't recognize. But one photograph stopped her cold. It was a picture of her, taken from a distance, outside her house. In the image, she was walking to her car, completely unaware that she was being watched. "Who took these?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding in her ears. Sam's expression was grim. "It's not just Alex who's in danger. Whoever he's involved with, they've been keeping tabs on you for a while now. I don't know their exact intentions, but it's clear that you're part of the equation." Julia's heart raced. "What do they want from me? Why am I being watched?" "I think they see you as leverage," Sam explained. "If Alex is as important to their operations as I think he is, then you're a potential bargaining chip. If anything goes wrong with him, they could use you to get to him." Julia's blood ran cold. The idea that she was nothing more than a pawn in some shadowy game of international espionage made her feel sick. Her life, her marriage, everything she had known had been built on lies, and now those lies were threatening to consume her. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice shaky. "How do I protect myself? How do I protect Sophie?" Sam leaned forward, his expression serious. "You need to be careful. Don't trust anyone. Especially not Alex. I'm working on getting more information. But until then, you have to keep playing the part. Don't let him know you're onto him. And whatever you do, don't confront him." Julia nodded, her mind racing. The weight of the situation was pressing down on her, suffocating her. She felt trapped, caught between the man she had loved for years and the cold, dangerous world he was entangled in. As they finished their conversation, Sam gave her one final piece of advice. "Julia, whatever happens, remember that they're watching. If you make one wrong move, they'll know. Stay alert, stay safe, and wait for my signal." Back home, Julia tried to maintain her composure. Alex was already asleep, his chest rising and falling in the quiet rhythm of slumber. She stood in the doorway, watching him, her mind a storm of conflicting emotions. How could he sleep so peacefully, knowing the chaos and danger that surrounded them? How could he continue living this lie, day after day, without the weight of his actions crushing him? Julia's eyes drifted to the closet, where she had found the black bag days earlier. She hadn't dared to touch it again. But now, with everything Sam had told her, she wondered if it held more clues, more pieces to the puzzle. Quietly, she crossed the room and knelt down by the closet door. Her hand shook as she reached for the bag, her heart pounding in her chest. Slowly, she unzipped it, her fingers trembling. Inside, she found a series of small, sleek devices, tracking equipment, listening devices, and more. It was a spy's toolkit, the kind of gear she had only seen in movies. But this was no fiction. This was her life. As she held one of the devices in her hand, a chill ran down her spine. This was it. This was proof of the life Alex had been hiding. But it was also proof that she was in over her head, and she had no idea how to get out. The final move. Julia stood in the dim light of the bedroom, her heart thudding heavily in her chest. The discovery of the black bag, filled with espionage tools, left her paralyzed. The man she had trusted with her life, with their daughter's future, was not the man she thought he was. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, run far away, take Sophie, and disappear. But she knew it wasn't that simple. She couldn't just escape this web. The weight of Sam's words rang in her ears. "You're part of the equation." Julia quietly zipped the bag back up and pushed it into the closet, feeling like she was burying a part of herself. As she stood, her gaze drifted toward Alex's sleeping figure. His calm, rhythmic breathing was almost cruel. He lay there peacefully, while her world crumbled around her. But something was off. She had seen Alex sleep 1,000 times, but this felt different. It was too still, too practiced. Her breath caught in her throat. He's awake. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, her body's primal instinct kicking in. She turned away from the closet, forcing herself to move slowly, pretending nothing was wrong. Her hands trembled as she straightened the blankets on her side of the bed, every movement deliberate. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see the slightest flicker. Alex's eyelids twitching, the almost imperceptible tension in his body. He was watching her, testing her. Was he onto her? Did he know what she had just found? She couldn't afford to panic, not now. Julia crawled into bed, her mind racing. She forced her breathing to slow, mimicking sleep, while her thoughts spiraled into darker possibilities. What if Alex knew everything? What if the surveillance on her wasn't just to control him, but to monitor her every move as well? Sleep wouldn't come, but she couldn't move, couldn't let him know how close she was to unraveling. The night stretched on, each minute heavy with tension. She lay there, wide-eyed in the darkness, trying to plan her next step. The next morning, Alex acted as though nothing had changed. He kissed her on the cheek as he left for work, his smile warm, casual. "I'll be home late," he said, as if those words didn't carry an eerie double meaning now. "Don't wait up." Julia forced a smile. "All right. Be safe." But once the door clicked shut behind him, She let the mask fall. Her hands shook, and her chest felt tight. She had to do something. Now. She couldn't stay in this house, couldn't stay in the crosshairs of a man who was capable of deceiving her so completely. Julia grabbed her phone and dialed Sam's number. He picked up on the first ring. "Julia, what's going on?" "He knows," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know how, but he knows. I think he's testing me, watching me." There was a brief pause on the other end. "You need to get out of there. Now. I can't just leave. He'll find me. I have Sophie to think about." Sam's voice softened. "I've been working on a plan, but it's risky. If we're going to do this, we need to move quickly. I have a safe house where you and Sophie can go. But you need to be ready to leave everything behind." Her heart sank. Leave everything. Their home, her career, her friends. Everything she had built was wrapped up in this life with Alex. But what choice did she have? She couldn't stay here, not knowing what Alex was truly capable of. "What's the plan?" she asked, steeling herself for what was to come. Sam's plan was both simple and terrifying. He had connections, people who could help her disappear, but it would require timing, precision, and absolute secrecy. Julia would have one shot to get Sophie and herself to safety before Alex, or anyone else, could catch on. The first step was critical: play along with Alex's routine for another day or two, keep things as normal as possible. Sam needed time to arrange the safe house and secure an escape route. Julia felt like she was walking a tightrope, every interaction with Alex charged with hidden tension. Every time he looked at her, every word he spoke, she wondered if he could see through her act. Her nerves were stretched thin, her anxiety growing with each passing hour. That evening, Alex came home late, as he had warned, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. He was quiet, observing her in a way that made her skin crawl. He barely spoke during dinner, and the silence between them was suffocating. "I'm tired," Julia said after they had cleared the dishes. "I think I'll head to bed early." Alex smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. I'll finish up down here." Julia nodded, feeling the weight of his gaze follow her as she climbed the stairs. Her heart pounded in her chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. She needed to stay calm. One wrong move could unravel everything. The next day was Saturday, her last chance to act before Sam's plan was put into motion. She spent the morning with Sophie, taking her to the park, trying to savor these small moments of normalcy. Sophie was oblivious to the storm brewing around her, her laughter light and carefree as she played on the swings. Julia watched her daughter, tears stinging her eyes. She hadn't told Sophie anything about what was happening. How could she explain that their lives were about to change forever? When they returned home, Alex was in his study, the door closed as usual. Julia's phone buzzed. It was Sam. "We're ready. You need to leave tonight. I'll text you the location. Don't tell anyone. Not even Sophie. Pack light and go. Make it look like a normal evening." Her pulse quickened. Tonight. Julia felt the minutes drag as the evening unfolded. She prepared dinner, her hands shaking, forcing herself to act natural. Alex sat across the table from her, his eyes flicking to Sophie, then to Julia with an unsettling calm. It was as if he knew something was coming but wasn't ready to confront it yet. After dinner, Julia tucked Sophie into bed, her heart aching as she kissed her forehead. This could be the last night Sophie would ever sleep in her own bed, in this house she had called home for so long. Julia's breath hitched as she whispered, "I love you, baby girl. Everything I do is to protect you." With Sophie asleep, Julia walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. Alex was already inside, his expression unreadable as he sat on the edge of the bed. She felt the tension between them, crackling like electricity in the air. "I was thinking we could talk," Alex said softly, his voice unusually gentle. "About us." Julia froze. She didn't trust his tone. It was too calm, too measured. "Talk about what?" Alex's gaze bore into hers. About the things we hide from each other. Her stomach twisted. He knows. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears as she struggled to keep her composure. What are you talking about? He stood, walking toward her slowly. I've been meaning to ask. What were you really doing in the attic the other day? Julia's mind raced. She couldn't let him trap her, couldn't let him see the panic rising in her chest. I was just cleaning up. I found some old boxes, that's all. Alex's eyes narrowed, his smile fading. Are you sure about that? Before she could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Sam. He had sent the location for the safe house. This was it. In that moment, Julia made her decision. She turned to Alex, her face a mask of calm. Yes, I'm sure. But deep inside, she was already preparing for her escape. Tonight, everything would change.